I'm working on building an inner cover for a nuke box, a 5-frame nuke. So this is the box that I'll use for fall splits. I go almost all foundationless with a little starter strip right here. So this is my 5-frame box. And I noticed the last few years, anytime I've tried to do a split in early spring, they're a little slow to take off, mostly because I'm not feeding them. And it's a little hard to feed them without an inner cover. So I have these migratory lids. I think that's what they're called. Just a simple, I think it's 1x8 that I cut. And usually I just, pull out 5 frames, maybe 2 of honey, 2 of brood, and then 1 of pollen, something like that. And the one with brood will usually have a couple eggs that are just a few days old. But then it's a small colony, it's 5 frames, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm in Illinois, northern Illinois, so it's not uncommon for us to have cold snaps in the beginning of the year, which could really put a small colony back when you're trying to make a split in the beginning of the year. So what I'm looking to do is create an inner cover, something that would sit over top, and then what I'm looking to do, so inner cover, and then put a half-gallon feeder there, and then I'll put an empty box and then put the lid on top. So I just want to create a little room for that hive to be able to grow. Here's a quick look at my workshop. Right here. So about 80–90% of the material I'm going to be using is from scrap. Right over here is the plywood I'll be using, and then already I've cut the dimensions for the wood over there. Let's get started. So that was the start of these pieces, all All these pieces have that first initial dado. Now I'm going to start working here down, cutting out room for that piece of plywood to fit into. Earlier I had mentioned that some of the pieces of wood have different thicknesses. This would be one case right here. You can see there's kind of a blade width difference. And at one point I was organized enough to know which one of these I changed to accommodate for that difference. Here's why it matters right here. You can see how it's not flush to the outside. So I need to figure that out here in a little bit. But now I'm just going to keep moving the blade. So the blade set right here. And again, you can see this lumber is not very good. I actually got almost all my 1x from Home Depot or, Menards. And they've got kind of a scrap lumber pile. That's where I got most of this lumber because it was bent, warped. And if I put this piece up, you can see it's kind of wobbly. That's just because it had a hard time ripping because the board was so wobbly. But it kind of got a straight edge on it, so it'll work, especially with an outer cover to cover up the bad edge. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this outside wall about 1/8 of an inch, whatever the thickness of my blade is here. And then I'm going to go through and give them all a second cut. So you can see how this is starting to open up. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. I'm going to go through this little pile of wood, open up that dado until a piece of plywood could fit in between. I want about a 3/4 inch reveal on one side and then a 1/4 inch on another. So again, I did my best to measure it, but a lot of times just a little test cut is all you need to get started. So I just kind of started it, notched it real quick, measured that out. That right there is about 1/4. That's what I'm looking for. So now I think this is a cut I had done yesterday as kind of like my stopping point, and between this and this should be the thickness of that plywood. So I'm going to start my first cut in here to start the dado. So let's see. So that's kind of what I need to start working out, is this little bit right in here. So I'm going to show you how I do that in a little bit. But first I'm going to run through and finish making the cuts on all these pieces and all the other pieces I have. In order to create the inner cover, most of what I used was just kind of scrap lumber I had laying around. Here I had some 1x's, which were actually an old door jamb that I cut up. You can see they're kind of grooved. These are ripped up 1x's. And what I did is I cut them down to about 1.5 inches, just kind of ripped them. Next, what I'm going to do is router them or dado them, so that this piece of plywood can kind of just sit right inside there. Cover it. I'm going to put a hole in it, so it'll kind of sit something like this. And the feeder would fit right on top. That way I can feed the bees once I split them. So I'm going to get started, but I just want to give you a quick overview. The way I did it, you can do it differently, is I've already dadoed the ends. You can see it there. So what I did, and this is very shoddy, or just kind of off the cuff, is I just kind of dry fit everything. I knew that I wanted from like a front appearance, I wanted this end to to look solid. And I also only wanted a smaller exposed end right here. So I did that just by dadoing. I just kind of dry fit everything. I'm again working with scrap lumber, so I actually found that two of the boards I was working with were different thicknesses, which really messed with my dado. Caught it early enough. I don't think I'll have any problems moving forward. You can see I've already started on the dado. Oops. On one. But what I'm looking for is on one side for there to be about a 1/4 inch reveal, and then on the back side a 3/4 inch reveal. I believe I'm using 1/2 inch plywood. Let's see, yeah, 1/2 inch. So next I'm going to start working on dadoing in on the edges so that the plywood can fit in between. I'll show you that here in a second. Inevitably, someone's going to ask the dimensions of this nuke box. It's a 5-frame nuke. I probably found the plans online. It's about 19 7/8 by 9 1/8. Those are the exterior dimensions. I'm using just kind of a 1x, which is actually, what is it? Yeah, about 3/4. These started out to be swarm boxes that I was hoping to use, but I never caught a swarm, so instead I thought I would just start using them for splits and trying to build up new colonies in the spring. The overall plan and how I built this was actually kind of sloppy, if I do say so myself. So I just used any scrap lumber that I had around. And let's see, I'll try to move it. Okay, well, most of the pieces are routed. Here's a completed one. You can see most of these are done. I just have to do one more pass. So maybe now you can see a little bit more. This is the 3/4 inch side. We're keeping that a little wider for in the winter when you have to use pollen patties, or if you want to do some sugar feeding. So the easiest way that I check this, and again, I started with my 1/4 inch. I just wanted to leave a 1/4 inch on one side, and then I just kept backing it until I got to where I thought it was close. I did this one strip, and I'm just kind of like dry fitting it. So you can see there, it's a good fit. It's snug, but there's just a teeny bit of room. That's for the glues and the staples. So essentially, once this is going like to the next step, it'll look something like that when it's all buttoned up. So I'm going to finish the rest of my cuts, and I know it's kind of a tedious process. There are other ways to do it. Over here, I actually have about a 1/2 inch router bit. Sometimes I hold this a 1/4 inch back, and then I just run these through once, maybe twice, to give it kind of that smooth finish. Yep, messy garage. So I'm going to finish the rest of these cuts. All right, well, here you can see I finished the dado. I know it's going to fit the plywood. I like to do a dry fit. You can see, making sure I did find the right thickness for the ones I had dadoed. Next important step is make sure your 1/4 inch side matches all the way around. I didn't really show too much of it, but every once in a while you'll get kind of like a rut where the blade didn't do a very clean cut. So I just come through with like a 1/4 inch chisel, just kind of make sure there aren't any high spots that are going to interfere. So I've got the scrap piece of plywood that I've been using, right here. So I'm just going to kind of do a rough estimate of the size I need. I know it goes in about, I know there are better ways to do this too, but I'm just kind of working quickly. So I'm going to say about 8.25. So let's see, these are different sizes, so I'm going to keep them separate over on this table. Now let's see, I think I said 8.25. So I'm going to put myself right at 8.25. So 8.25, and you'll see here in a second here, kind of piece it together like that, and then like that, just kind of put some button together. Now it's fairly close. See, it's nice and snug. So come on. So on this side you can see how it's touching both sides. It's snugged together. Now again, I'm a little lazy, so I just want to see. Yep. Gotta keep the baby monitor on. So remember, it's sitting inside this piece, so I want the plywood to catch there. So I'm just going to eyeball it right here. Got my mark. Oops. Got to keep that separate. I realize at some point someone's going to think or say that I should raise this blade up so I don't have to do a true pass. But I've got it set at the depth I need for the dado this way and the dado this way, so I don't want to mess with it. Let's see. My mark is right there. And you see how this is just quickly going together now. It's really not that hard to build one of these, especially if you have limited equipment. Let's see, I think I need to take off a little bit more. Let's see. Oh yeah. All right. It's one of the say as I do, not as I say. I need to go like that. It's sitting in, but it's going to be on one side. cut right there was mostly unnecessary, but go. Goes together. Now I'm going to staple this, or rather glue and staple it together. For any beekeeping project, I usually use Tite Bond 3. It's waterproof, exterior, interior. I read it on a beekeeping forum, so that's what I use. Clean any dust out. Make sure you have glue in the bottle. Whoops, it didn't. Alright, so I like to glue everything and staple everything kind of within one fell swoop. Come on. I know I'll get to it in a second too. But for the fastener, I like to just use my crown stapler. It's quick. The glue provides that really strong grip. And the staples just kind of keep everything snug while everything sets. Just want to make sure everything's snug, everything's tight. There we go. And start on the ends. Crown stapler, 1.125 or 1.25 is what I'm using. You can see everything's nice and snug, tight. So now that it's built, again there's glue in the rail. I'm just going to kind of press it together, walk around with a couple of staples. Close. The staples aren't too, I don't need to be too generous. Sorry about that. Don't need to be too generous with the staples. It's mostly holding itself together with the glue. So there it is. There's my inner cover for the 5-frame nuke, but it's not done. I'll show you the next step right now. Last step, second to last, I guess, is to put a hole in the center. So I measured across, outside to outside, I think it's 20, and then edge to edge, it's 9 inches. So put a dot in the middle. I went ahead and did that. I'm just going to put it something like this, and then line this up. The finished product of kind of that inner cover. So in the spring, what I'll do a lot of times is like if the parent 10-frame deep hive is full, I might take one of honey, one of pollen, and then I checkerboard the old one with a couple new frames like this. This is also a way I kind of recycle comb, so that the old hive gets new comb. And you put this in, then the bees have a couple new frames to start drawing, and then I take those frames and what I'll do is I'll put them in a nuke like this. I'll keep the brood together, and then it might be a frame of pollen right here and then 2 frames of honey, so that the bees have all the resources they need to get started. And then I've got a little bottom board, but in the spring we get some cold snaps in winter, so it'll be nice to put a pollen patty over here. That's what this 3/4 gap is for. So I could put a pollen patty or cut a pollen patty in half and put 2 strips on either side, and then put this upside down, and now I've got a hole right here where I can feed the bees. So what I do is I've got a half gallon jar. One second. All right, so this is a gallon jar. I don't use this, it's just kind of a jar I had here in my garage. But I put the cap on it, a couple holes in the lid, and then you take it, put it upside down, something like that. Put another empty box here to protect it, put your lid, and now your nucleus colony has sugar. Again, not this big. This is a little ridiculous. Look how big that thing is. That's a gallon glass jar. Put that over. The bees have the sugars, the supplies they need. And yeah, that's a quick little video of how to make an inner cover. Again, you can do the same thing with a 10 frame deep box. Just measure the outside edge here to here. Then I pulled it in about 1/4, so whatever your length is, it'd be, actually, yeah, this would be the same. What is that? So for 10 frame deep, just get longer end bars, and then this would be about the same at right here. I've got 19 1/8, and again I cut let's see, about just shy of a 3/8 inch dado, and left about 3/8 on the outside here. I hope this is helpful, insightful. Let me know what you think. Thank you and have a good day.